When my stepdaughter got married, I never told her I'd inherited $9 million from her grandfather. Thank God I kept that secret, because 2 weeks after the wedding, her new husband sat across from me at my own dinner table with a stack of papers asking me to simplify things before I got too old to manage money on my own. He had no idea I already knew exactly what he was doing. My name is Robert Hale. I'm 58 years old, and I live just outside Denver, Colorado. Until a year ago, I was a retired contractor who spent his weekends restoring an old Chevy pickup in the garage. Nobody at the lumber yard knew what was sitting in an account with my name on it. Nobody needed to know. Settle in, because this story doesn't end where you think it will. If you're new here, hit subscribe, drop a comment, and tell me where you're watching from. You don't want to miss this one. My wife Linda passed away 4 years ago. Her daughter from her first marriage, Claire, was 22 at the time and had already started calling me Dad long before Linda and I ever got married. I raised her from the time she was 9 years old. She was mine in every way that mattered, blood or not. Linda's father, a man named Harold Whitfield, had built a small chain of auto parts stores across 3 states back in the 60s. He and I had a distant but respectful relationship. Quiet dinners twice a year, nothing more. He never made a fuss about Claire not being his biological granddaughter. If anything, he seemed to appreciate that I'd stepped up when nobody else did. Harold died in his sleep last February at 88 years old. No warning, no long illness, just a phone call on a Tuesday morning that changed everything. I sat in my kitchen holding the phone long after the line went dead, not sure what I was supposed to feel about a man I barely knew, yet somehow deeply respected. The will reading happened 10 days later in a small law office with a lawyer named Marcus Webb, who had handled Harold's affairs for over 2 decades. I expected maybe a token gift, some tools, an old watch, a small check. I did not expect Mr. Webb to slide a folder across the desk and tell me Harold had left the bulk of his estate to me. Not to distant cousins, not even split with anyone else, to me. Once the shares from the sold business, the properties, and the investment accounts were all totaled and the taxes accounted for, the number came out to just over $9 million. The room went silent except for a clock ticking somewhere behind me. I asked Mr. Webb to repeat the number, not because I hadn't heard him, but because my brain refused to process it. There was a letter, too, sealed, addressed only to me. I didn't open it there. I folded it into my jacket and drove home in complete silence. That night, sitting alone at my kitchen table, I made a decision that would shape everything that followed. I wasn't going to tell anyone. Not my brother, not my old co-workers, and especially not Claire, who was 4 months away from her wedding day. I told myself it was temporary, that I just needed time to think before money changed the way people looked at me, or at her. I had no idea yet how right that instinct would turn out to be. Claire had been dating a man named Dylan Marsh for about 1.5 years. He was 31, worked in financial consulting, which as far as I could tell meant he gave advice to people who never asked for it. He was charming in that practiced, camera-ready way, always complimenting my truck, my garage, whatever was nearby. The kind of charm that feels warm for an hour and starts feeling thin after a week. Early on, before I knew a single thing about the inheritance, Dylan asked me once over beers on my porch whether Harold and I were close and whether there was ever talk of money in the family. I laughed it off, told him Harold and I barely spoke outside holidays. He nodded slowly and changed the subject. But he asked a version of the same question again a month later, wrapped inside a comment about Claire's student loans. I told myself I was being paranoid. I was wrong. When Harold died and probate records quietly became public that spring, I noticed something shift in Dylan almost immediately. He proposed to Claire 3 weeks later, faster than anyone expected, including Claire herself. She was thrilled. I smiled along with everyone else. But some quiet part of me had already started paying attention, and once you start noticing a pattern, you can't stop seeing it. Wedding planning became its own kind of pressure. Dylan wanted an expensive venue outside the city, the kind that costs more for one evening than most people make in 2 months. Claire kept apologizing to me about costs, insisting they'd figure it out on their own. Every time she said that, something in my chest tightened. I quietly covered a large portion of the wedding myself, wiring money directly to vendors, telling Claire it came from savings and a modest payout from her grandfather's estate. Not exactly a lie, just not the whole truth. Dylan, for his part, seemed very interested in exactly how those payments were being made. He asked Claire more than once whether her stepdad had come into some money, phrasing it like a joke, but his eyes weren't joking. Claire brushed it off, telling him I'd just been a careful saver my whole life. I let her believe that too, because it was easier than opening a door I wasn't ready to open. The wedding itself was beautiful. Claire looked radiant, and for a few hours I let myself just be a proud father instead of a man sitting on a secret worth $9 million. During his toast, Dylan talked at length about building a secure future and making smart financial decisions as a family, an odd focus for a wedding speech. I clapped along with everyone else, but underneath it, that same cold, quiet feeling from the porch returned. About 3 weeks after the honeymoon, Dylan started calling me directly, not Claire, me. Lunch invitations, offers to help around the house, questions about how I managed my accounts, whether I'd ever considered consolidating things to make life easier as I got older. I'd spent 30 years running job sites, and you learn fast how to spot someone buttering you up before asking for something bigger. Dylan was doing exactly that, just with a nicer haircut. I needed to know how much he actually knew. So I called an old friend, Nate Ferris, a retired detective who did private background work on the side. I laid out the whole situation over coffee. Harold, the will, the $9 million, Dylan's creeping questions. Nate wasn't surprised. He explained that probate filings are public record, meaning anyone patient enough could search county court databases and find out exactly what an estate was worth and who inherited it. It took him 15 minutes to confirm the number himself. Then he asked when Dylan had proposed. I told him. He pulled up the date the estate became public record. Harold died in February. The filing went public in early March. Dylan proposed the 3rd week of March. Nate looked at me and said quietly, "Robert, I think you need to ask yourself if this was ever really about Claire." I didn't want to believe it, but some part of me already did. Nate dug deeper over the next 2 weeks, and what he found was almost textbook. Dylan had been engaged once before, to a woman named Sarah, whose family owned a regional trucking company. That engagement collapsed 8 months in, right around the time Sarah's father sold the business, and the money didn't flow the way Dylan expected. There'd also been a pattern in his job history. 3 different roles in 5 years, each ending shortly after he tried inserting himself into a client's personal finances, once even getting added as an authorized user on someone's account before being let go. None of it was criminal, but all of it painted the same picture. A man who found opportunity in relationships and moved fast once he sensed real money nearby. About a month later, Dylan called and said he wanted to stop by with some paperwork. Nothing serious, just a family protection plan his advisor recommended. When Saturday came, he arrived with a folder and a notary named Grace trailing behind him. My stomach dropped the moment I saw her lanyard. He explained it gently. A document naming him as a secondary authorized contact on my accounts, in case anything ever happened to me, framed entirely around love and caution. He even referenced Harold's sudden death as a reason to be prepared. I let him finish. Then I asked calmly if he wanted to know how I found out about Sarah. His face changed instantly. I laid it all out, the probate timeline, the engagement that fell apart when the money didn't come, the job history, the account he'd tried to access before. Grace, the notary, sat frozen, clearly realizing this wasn't the routine signing she'd been called in for. Dylan tried to recover, insisting this was about family security, that any reasonable person plans ahead. I let him talk for a full minute so he could hear how thin it sounded out loud. Then I slid the folder back across the table, unsigned, and told him Claire would hear every word of this from me before the week was out. I called Claire that afternoon and asked her to come alone. I sat her down at that same table and told her everything. The inheritance, the probate timeline, Sarah, the job history, the recording I'd quietly kept running on my phone since Grace walked through the door. Claire sat in stunned silence, her coffee going cold. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. "He asked me twice last month if you'd ever mentioned changing your will," she said. It confirmed everything. She thanked me quietly, took the folder and Nate's report, and told me she needed to talk to Dylan herself. 2 days later she called, exhausted but clear. Dylan had denied everything at first, then pivoted to blaming me for hiding the money in the first place, as if that excused researching her stepfather's net worth before proposing. Claire didn't buy it. She packed a bag that night and didn't go home. 3 weeks later, she filed for an annulment. Dylan didn't fight it once he understood the evidence existed. His mother made a few calls trying to smooth things over. Claire stopped answering. A few weeks after that, just the two of us at the kitchen table on a quiet Sunday, I told her the rest. About Harold, about the years of distance, about wanting to set some of that money aside for her properly, with a lawyer, done right, connected to no one who hadn't earned her trust. She cried a little, not from sadness this time, but relief. She told me she didn't care about the money nearly as much as she cared that I'd been quietly protecting her the whole time, even when she had no idea there was anything to protect her from. It's been almost a year now. Claire is doing well, back in school, building a life on her own terms. We talk most days, real conversations, not the careful, surface-level ones we used to have when I was carrying a secret without even realizing how much it was protecting her. People sometimes ask if I regret not telling her sooner. The honest answer is no, not for 1 second. If I had told anyone, Dylan would have gotten exactly what he wanted from the start, and I never would have seen who he really was until it was far too late to do anything about it. Staying quiet wasn't about hiding money. It was about giving the truth room to show itself naturally, without me forcing it, without anyone performing a kindness they didn't actually feel. If you made it this far, you already know this story was never really about the money. It was about paying attention. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button, subscribe for more real family stories, and let me know in the comments what you would have done in my place. I'll see you in the next one.